Julio always looked forward to family gatherings, even if part of him hated admitting it. There was something magnetic about Natalia, his cousin, that made the air feel heavier whenever she was around. She laughed with a kind of warmth that drew everyone in, yet Julio felt it differently, like her laughter echoed inside him in ways he couldn't name. He told himself it was just admiration, just a cousin being impressive, but deep down, he sensed it was more complicated. Sitting across the table, he noticed the little things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, or how she carefully listened to others. Every gesture, small or big, seemed to leave a mark on him, subtle, but impossible to ignore. Family conversations flowed easily, but Julio often found himself quiet, observing instead of joining in. Natalia shared stories from her life, full of clever observations and gentle humor, and he hung on every word as if it contained secret messages meant only for him. He loved the way she made everyone feel included, yet he felt a strange twinge of longing that he couldn't quite explain. Even when others laughed at her jokes, he noticed the spark in her eyes, the way she made ordinary moments feel electric. He tried to shake off the thoughts that crept in, telling himself it was just admiration, yet his heart betrayed him with every glance. Somewhere between pride, awe, and something heavier, Julio realized he was walking a fine line without fully knowing it. It wasn't just gatherings that pulled him in, it was their shared interests, small threads that wove them together effortlessly. Cooking, books, and even music became excuses to talk, to laugh, to linger in moments longer than necessary. Natalia always asked questions that made him think, that made him feel seen, and it was intoxicating. Julio started noticing how his chest tightened whenever she was near, a mix of excitement and fear he couldn't put into words. He began wondering if she felt it too, or if it was all in his head, a dangerous game of desire disguised as admiration. The realization hung over him like a shadow. This wasn't something he could simply ignore, and yet he didn't want to. Julio couldn't help but notice the way Natalia moved through the room, effortless and confident, like she belonged everywhere at once. Every gesture she made, pouring tea, adjusting a cushion, laughing at a subtle joke, felt magnified in his mind, almost as if the world slowed for her. He struggled to focus on anyone else, his thoughts circling back to her smile, her voice, the way her eyes seemed to carry understanding and mischief at the same time. There was warmth there, but also something untouchable, like a secret locked behind a door he didn't have the key for. The more he tried to convince himself it was just admiration, the more his emotions tangled into something he didn't yet have a name for. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall could change everything. In quieter moments, when the chatter of family softened, Julio caught himself studying her intently, noticing little details no one else seemed to see. The slight crease of her forehead when she concentrated, the rhythm of her laughter, the way she paused before choosing her words, all of it felt magnetic. He felt a pull that confused him, a rush of something tender and urgent that made his chest ache. And yet, beneath that pull, a whisper of fear lingered. What if these feelings were wrong? What if they were seen? What if they changed everything he held dear? It was a delicate balance, and every moment near her tested his ability to act normal. He realized that even a casual touch or glance could be enough to reveal a truth he wasn't ready to confront. At night, after everyone had gone to bed, Julio replayed the day in his mind, a mix of ordinary events and extraordinary feelings. He remembered laughing at one of Natalia's jokes, the sparkle in her eyes, and how a simple brush of hands at the dinner table sent his heart racing. He tried to rationalize it, to tell himself he was overthinking, that family bonds sometimes just feel intense, but deep down he felt a knot of longing, a quiet ache that refused to go away. Memories of her kindness, intelligence, and charm tangled with this unspoken desire, creating a storm he didn't know how to calm. The night felt heavy, full of both anticipation and dread, hinting at a path he wasn't sure he was ready to walk. The next family gathering arrived, and Julio found himself caught between excitement and dread. He watched Natalia from across the room, her presence filling the space in a way that made him simultaneously thrilled and nervous. Every laugh, every glance felt like a secret signal he wasn't sure he could decode. He wanted to stay close, to hear her thoughts, but a small, cautious part of him reminded him of boundaries, lines he wasn't supposed to cross. And yet, the pull was irresistible, like a tide he couldn't fight, a subtle current that drew him toward something both beautiful and dangerous. Each interaction, no matter how casual, seemed loaded with meaning, intensifying feelings he didn't know how to name. During a quiet moment in the kitchen, Natalia caught him staring and smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips that made his heart skip. Julio felt his pulse quicken, the world narrowing until it was just the two of them in a room full of chatter. He struggled to find words, to keep his composure, but the intensity of the moment left him breathless. It was in these tiny exchanges, the lingering look, the shared laugh, the accidental brush of hands, that everything became complicated. He questioned whether she sensed the storm inside him, or if it existed only in his mind, a private chaos he was forced to contain. The mixture of hope and fear coiled inside him, leaving him both eager and terrified of what might come next. As the day drew to a close, Julio realized the feelings he carried weren't fleeting, they were persistent and impossible to ignore. He understood, with a mixture of awe and apprehension, that something fundamental had shifted between them, a subtle current that could not be undone. And yet, the fear of discovery, of misunderstanding, loomed over him like a shadow he couldn't escape. The emotions, tangled and raw, whispered promises of closeness and danger at the same time, leaving him restless and contemplative. Every ordinary interaction now carried weight, every glance a hidden question, every touch a quiet rebellion against the rules he thought he understood. Julio knew this was just the beginning, a delicate dance that could change everything if he let it unfold. It was late afternoon when Julio found himself alone with Natalia in the quiet living room, a rare moment away from the buzz of family chatter. The air felt heavier somehow, thick with a tension neither of them had yet named aloud. He noticed the way her eyes softened when she laughed at something trivial, and suddenly, the ordinary felt electric. His chest tightened, a mix of longing and guilt pressing him down as he wondered if she sensed his feelings. For a moment, words failed him, leaving only the pull of proximity and the subtle ache in his chest. The room felt smaller, warmer, charged with something both delicate and dangerous, a moment suspended in time. Julio, almost without thinking, reached out to steady a cup she had set down, his fingers brushing hers for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was impulsive, fleeting, and utterly human, a gesture that spoke louder than words ever could. Natalia's eyes flickered with surprise, a hint of something he couldn't immediately read, concern, curiosity, or perhaps a quiet acknowledgement of the tension. The small contact left him flustered, aware of the line he had nearly crossed, yet unable to retract the warmth it sparked inside him. He tried to mask his racing heart, shifting his gaze to the floor, but the energy between them lingered, stubborn and persistent. It was a simple touch, but its resonance would echo far longer than he anticipated. Neither spoke for a long moment, the silence itself heavy with unspoken thoughts. Natalia's expression was a mixture of amusement and caution, her smile gentle but slightly guarded, as if she were navigating her own awareness of the moment. Julio felt a swirl of emotions: shame, excitement, fear, and an almost dizzying longing that left him unsteady. The private intensity of that instant pressed against the rules they had always known, the boundaries that had always defined their interactions. He realized with a sinking thrill that nothing would feel the same after this, that every glance and gesture would carry new meaning. And yet, the danger, the possibility of discovery, only made his heart beat faster, whispering that some lines once approached were impossible to ignore. Julio couldn't shake the warmth from the fleeting touch, a fire that seemed to linger in his veins long after his hand had pulled away. Every detail of Natalia, the tilt of her head, the curve of her smile, the soft cadence of her voice, played on repeat in his mind. He felt caught between exhilaration and panic, as if standing on the edge of something thrilling but forbidden. Natalia, meanwhile, moved with a subtle grace, her reactions careful, measured, and yet tinged with something unreadable. She seemed aware of the shift, yet she didn't recoil, leaving him guessing about her thoughts. The room, once ordinary, now hummed with an undercurrent of tension, alive with the electricity of emotions neither dared name. As they talked, Julio struggled to keep his composure, aware that even a slight misstep could reveal more than intended. Every laugh felt loaded, every shared glance a potential spark, and he wrestled internally with desire and restraint. Natalia's warmth and intelligence drew him in, making it nearly impossible to act casual. He wondered if she noticed the way his words sometimes faltered, or the way his eyes lingered longer than they should. And yet, he also recognized the danger. They were teetering on a line, and one wrong move could unravel everything. The thought of family discovering even a hint of their closeness sent a shiver down his spine, intensifying both fear and longing. The tension was both intoxicating and terrifying, a mixture that left Julio restless and thoughtful long after the moment passed. He replayed every interaction, analyzing her expressions, trying to decipher what she felt and what was merely his imagination. Natalia, too, seemed to carry a quiet awareness, a subtle recognition of the unspoken intensity, though she chose discretion over confession. The private space they shared became a kind of emotional minefield, where each small gesture had weight and consequence. Julio understood that their feelings were dangerously close to exposure, yet the closeness also offered a strange comfort, a connection he had never felt before. Every heartbeat, every glance, seemed to carry a silent question. How far could they allow themselves to go before it all shifted? By evening, the room felt charged with an invisible tension, every sound and movement magnified in Julio's mind. He noticed how Natalia's laughter lingered longer than necessary, how her gaze occasionally found his across the space, subtle yet deliberate. His emotions swirled, excitement, guilt, longing, all tangled into a restless ache he couldn't ignore. The fleeting moments they shared, brief touches and whispered words, left him dizzy with anticipation. He realized that nothing between them would ever feel the same again. A door had been opened, and there was no turning back. The thrill of their closeness came hand in hand with the gnawing fear of exposure, a dangerous mix that made his chest tighten. Natalia, ever composed, moved with quiet awareness, a delicate balance of warmth and restraint. She seemed to sense the boundaries, testing them in subtle ways, like a gentle breeze brushing against a fragile curtain. Her reactions, soft smiles, knowing glances, careful gestures, kept Julio both hopeful and cautious. He caught himself imagining what it would mean if these moments escalated, yet a small, cautious voice reminded him of the rules he couldn't break. The ambiguity of her response, neither clear acceptance nor rejection, kept him suspended in a state of emotional limbo. Every shared glance became a silent question, a fleeting promise, and the room itself seemed to hold its breath along with him. As the night drew near, Julio understood the unspoken truth. They had crossed a threshold, and the aftermath would demand careful navigation. The danger of discovery loomed, yet the emotional closeness tugged relentlessly at his heart. Every ordinary interaction would now carry weight, every gesture layered with hidden meaning, and he was both terrified and exhilarated. Natalia's presence had become a magnetic force, one that pulled him towards something he wasn't sure he could control. And in the quiet hum of the evening, Julio realized that their connection, complicated, fragile, and thrilling, was only beginning to shape the path ahead. The next choice, the next moment alone, would define just how far they could go without shattering what held them together. Family gatherings became a subtle minefield for Julio and Natalia, each interaction layered with hidden meaning and quiet tension. He watched her from across the room, marveling at her ability to navigate conversations with charm and intelligence, all while feeling a storm of emotions he couldn't fully name. Every accidental brush of hands or shared glance carried weight, and he felt the thrill and fear in equal measure. Natalia seemed aware of their growing closeness, her expressions measured, careful, yet occasionally betraying a flicker of curiosity or hesitation. They moved through social interactions like dancers, step by step, avoiding missteps that could expose the fragile balance they maintained. Each day brought a mix of longing, guilt, and excitement, and Julio found himself constantly recalibrating his emotions. During quieter moments, his mind drifted into internal debates, replaying every conversation, every touch, and every laugh. He questioned whether Natalia felt the same subtle pull, or if it was all in his head, a dangerous illusion he couldn't let go of. The psychological tension gnawed at him, a constant undercurrent beneath the surface of daily life. Natalia, too, carried her own silent struggle, balancing kindness, closeness, and the awareness of boundaries. Their unspoken connection became a shared secret, a delicate thread that tethered them together in ways words could never capture. Even ordinary activities, pouring coffee, discussing a book, or walking through the garden, took on a new, electric dimension in the charged atmosphere between them. As the days passed, Julio and Natalia became experts at navigating the tightrope of appearances versus desire. He noticed subtle signs of her thoughtfulness, the way she occasionally lingered near him in conversation, the warmth in her smile, the little jokes that felt meant for him alone. Yet, just as quickly, boundaries reasserted themselves, reminding him of the danger if anyone noticed. The balance between closeness and discretion became a constant puzzle, each piece placed with careful consideration. Their bond deepened emotionally, even as the fear of exposure created a sharp edge to every interaction. In the quiet moments of reflection, Julio understood that navigating desire and family loyalty was far more complex than he had ever imagined. Even in the midst of laughter and chatter, Julio felt a quiet tension that he carried like a shadow over every family event. Every casual touch, every fleeting glance from Natalia sent his heart into a complicated rhythm of excitement and guilt. He became acutely aware of the way she spoke, how she tilted her head when listening, how her presence seemed to fill spaces he didn't even know existed. Natalia, meanwhile, navigated the subtle push and pull with grace, showing care and warmth without giving away the depth of her own emotions. The unspoken rules they followed created a delicate tension, each interaction a careful dance, and with every step, Julio felt the thrill of closeness and the fear of discovery intertwined, a mix that both exhilarated and restrained him. Internal monologues became his refuge, moments where he could untangle his emotions without judgment. He reflected on longing and restraint, replaying brief interactions with Natalia, as if searching for hidden meanings in her words or gestures. The guilt of feeling something forbidden weighed on him, yet the connection, the way she made him feel seen and understood, was impossible to dismiss. Natalia's perspective was quieter, less obvious, but equally charged. She questioned the boundaries she had always observed, aware of the magnetic pull between them, yet cautious of the consequences. Their thoughts mirrored each other, though neither spoke them aloud, creating a tension that simmered beneath every polite exchange. Even ordinary daily routines became charged with meaning. A simple walk through the garden, or preparing a meal together feeling like an emotional minefield. Julio noticed every small gesture, the way she handed him a plate, the laugh she let linger just slightly longer, the fleeting eye contact that said more than words ever could. Natalia seemed to sense the same intensity, a quiet acknowledgement in her expressions that made every moment electric and unpredictable. Each day passed with a mix of longing, guilt, and anticipation, a rhythm they both felt but rarely named. The subtle tension between desire and discretion became a constant companion, shaping how they moved, spoke, and even breathed around each other. Every interaction became a silent negotiation, an unspoken question of how far they could go without crossing the line. The constant balancing act weighed on Julio in ways he hadn't anticipated, each family event a test of self-control and awareness. He noticed the smallest details, how Natalia's fingers brushed against a tablecloth, how her laughter lingered just a second too long, how her gaze occasionally caught his in fleeting acknowledgement. Every minor interaction became a storm of unspoken feelings. A quiet drama played out behind polite smiles. Natalia, for her part, maintained her composure, yet he sensed the same awareness in her subtle gestures, a recognition of the tension simmering between them. They existed in a delicate bubble of shared understanding, a fragile space where desire and caution intertwined. The emotional strain was not always thrilling. Sometimes it was heavy, pressing on Julio's chest like a weight he couldn't set down. Guilt mingled with longing, making every conversation both a pleasure and a trial. Natalia's quiet kindness and perceptive nature made it almost impossible for him to suppress his emotions, yet the ever-present fear of crossing a line kept him tethered. Moments of accidental intimacy, a shared laugh, a brush of hands, amplified both the connection and the anxiety. Their internal worlds collided in these fleeting interactions, creating a tension that neither dared to fully voice. Each day reinforced the delicate dance, a careful negotiation of hearts and boundaries that had no easy resolution. By the end of the day, Julio felt the tug-of-war between desire and caution more acutely than ever. He realized their connection had deepened beyond what he could ignore, yet the risk of exposure hung over them like a shadow. Every glance carried a hidden weight, every conversation a quiet test of restraint and awareness. Natalia's presence, constant and magnetic, had become both a source of comfort and a trigger of tension, leaving him both exhilarated and cautious. As he reflected in the quiet moments alone, he understood that navigating their bond required a delicate balance, a constant awareness of the line they could never fully cross. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, The emotional closeness they shared hinted at challenges and choices that were only just beginning to unfold. Life had a way of testing Julio and Natalia, throwing small, unpredictable moments that made their secret bond both thrilling and precarious. An accidental touch while reaching for a dish, a whispered comment meant for someone else, or a shared laugh that lingered too long. Each incident felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of consequences. Julio's heart raced at every near miss, and he became hyper-aware of every gesture and glance. Natalia, ever perceptive, seemed to navigate the same delicate line, her expressions careful, her voice just the right tone. The ordinary rhythm of family life suddenly became a field of hidden dangers, each one testing their self-control and emotional resilience. Even the smallest interactions carried an electric charge, leaving them both tense and exhilarated. Private moments, rare and fleeting, only heightened the complexity of their emotions. Julio noticed how close she stood when passing by, how her hand lingered on a railing, how her eyes searched his for silent understanding. He wanted to reach out, to speak the feelings that churned inside him, but fear held him back. Natalia, too, seemed caught in the same push and pull, aware of the risk, yet unable to fully suppress the subtle signals of connection. Their unspoken tension was a mix of desire, caution, and mutual understanding, a quiet storm that could erupt at any moment. Each interaction became a test of willpower, a moment where the stakes were invisible, yet undeniable. The psychological toll of secrecy weighed heavily on both of them, a constant hum beneath every smile and conversation, every accidental brush of hands, every moment of unintended intimacy, amplified both guilt and longing, keeping them on edge. Julio found himself replaying these moments over and over, analyzing her reactions, questioning the line between imagination and reality. Natalia, in turn, carried her own internal dialogue, balancing emotional closeness with the careful maintenance of boundaries. The bond between them deepened with each subtle interaction, even as the risk of discovery loomed ever larger. And in that tension, they realized that their connection was becoming something that demanded both vigilance and emotional courage. A sudden moment of closeness made Julio's chest tighten like never before. They were reaching for the same book on a high shelf, and their hands brushed, lingering just a fraction longer than usual. He felt a jolt, a rush of warmth mixed with panic, as if the world had contracted around that tiny contact. Natalia's eyes met his for a heartbeat, and her expression held a subtle question he couldn't answer. He forced a smile, pretending nothing happened, while inside, every nerve seemed alive with tension. That single fleeting touch became a memory he'd replay for hours, each replay amplifying both longing and fear. Family gatherings became more intricate, with every interaction layered in caution. Julio and Natalia learned to communicate silently, through subtle gestures, small nods and knowing glances, careful that no one else would notice. Even the act of sitting near each other carried weight. A brush of a knee, a shared glance across the table, each ordinary action transformed into something laden with unspoken meaning. Natalia navigated the closeness with a quiet elegance, her warmth tempered by caution, and it left Julio both mesmerized and frustrated. The tension grew, not just from desire, but from the constant awareness that one slip could unravel the careful balance they maintained. Every laugh, every shared story, every subtle touch became a careful negotiation of emotions and boundaries. The constant awareness of risk began to feel suffocating at times. Julio felt the weight of every thought, every glance, and every small, stolen moment that could be misunderstood or exposed. Natalia, too, wrestled with the unspoken rules of their connection, balancing her affection and understanding against the need for discretion. Their emotional bond deepened, yet it came with the sharp edge of danger, a thrilling and terrifying mix that kept them constantly alert. Each day brought new challenges, small touches, fleeting private conversations, or moments when someone almost noticed, and in that delicate tension, both realized that maintaining their connection required careful strategy, emotional patience, and a willingness to endure constant inner conflict. One evening, a minor accident nearly exposed the fragile bond they had been guarding. A spilled drink brought them both to the floor, their hands colliding as they reached to help, and the closeness sent a jolt of adrenaline through Julio. Natalia's soft laugh echoed, masking the tension, but the brush of her hand against his lingered in his mind long after. He felt his heart hammering, a mix of exhilaration and panic, acutely aware of how dangerous their connection had become. That fleeting moment reminded them that every interaction carried consequences, and that even the smallest gestures could be read in ways they didn't intend. The room seemed to pulse with quiet electricity, a subtle reminder of both desire and risk. Despite the near disaster, the emotional bond between them grew stronger, a paradox that both thrilled and terrified Julio. He noticed the way Natalia seemed more present in small, ordinary moments, a warmth and attentiveness that felt intensely personal. Every shared joke, every glance, every conversation became more meaningful, layered with the unspoken awareness of what they could and could not reveal. Natalia, too, navigated this dangerous closeness with careful grace, her expressions and gestures a delicate dance of caution and curiosity. The risk of discovery added an edge to every interaction, intensifying their emotions and making each private moment feel precious and fleeting. It was a tension that neither could fully resolve, a silent acknowledgement that desire and discretion would always collide. As days passed, both Julio and Natalia realized that the delicate balance they maintained required constant vigilance and emotional discipline. Each accidental touch, lingering glance, and subtle conversation carried the weight of potential exposure, testing their boundaries repeatedly. Their bond had deepened in ways that words could not fully capture, creating a mix of longing, fear, and emotional intimacy. Every interaction became a silent negotiation of trust, self-control, and connection, a delicate art they were learning to master. Yet, the risk remained, a persistent shadow over their closeness, reminding them that passion and prudence must coexist, and with every moment, they understood that the next choice they made could either protect or unravel the fragile web they had so carefully spun. The days that followed brought a new clarity to Julio and Natalia, a quiet reckoning with the feelings that had woven themselves so tightly into their lives. Julio felt a mix of relief and sadness, realizing that desire and closeness could exist without overstepping boundaries. Natalia, too, seemed to carry a reflective calm, her warmth now tempered by thoughtful restraint. They shared moments of laughter, conversation, and mutual understanding that no longer teetered on the edge of danger. It was a delicate balance, one that required vigilance but also allowed them to savor emotional intimacy safely. The risk hadn't vanished entirely, but the tension had softened into a mindful, respectful closeness. Julio found himself appreciating the quiet depth of their bond more than ever. He noticed subtle gestures, her small attentions, her patience, the way she truly listened, that spoke volumes without words. Natalia seemed to embody a gentle mentorship now, offering guidance, shared stories, and connection without the complicating edge of desire. Their interactions, once fraught with longing and uncertainty, now carried a warmth that was safe and sustaining. Even simple moments, a shared coffee, a casual chat, or a walk together, felt rich and meaningful. Theirs was a connection that had grown stronger through discipline, reflection, and mutual respect. The realization settled slowly, a quiet satisfaction mixed with nostalgia for the intensity of what they had navigated. Julio understood that emotional bonds could be profound, even when boundaries were respected, and that sometimes love or admiration was about restraint rather than fulfillment. Natalia's presence, once a source of turmoil, had become a steady, comforting force, guiding him with wisdom and care. Their story now felt like a private treasure, a reflection on trust, patience, and the power of emotional intimacy. And in the quiet, reflective moments, Julio recognized the truth that would stay with him. Some connections are too precious to risk, yet they can flourish beautifully when nurtured with respect. Julio reflected on the journey they had shared, the mix of tension, longing, and careful restraint that had defined their bond. Every near miss, every fleeting moment of closeness had taught him the value of patience and self-control. He realized that the intensity of their emotions had forged a connection far deeper than simple desire. It was built on understanding, empathy, and trust. Natalia, too, carried a quiet pride in how they had navigated the delicate line between closeness and caution. Her guidance and warmth created a sense of safety, allowing Julio to explore his feelings without fear. Theirs had become a rare, unspoken understanding, a connection strengthened precisely because it was tempered by wisdom and care. Even in ordinary routines, the depth of their bond was apparent. Sharing meals, discussing books, or simply sitting together in companionable silence, now felt rich with meaning. Julio noticed how Natalia's subtle attentions, the tilt of her head, the patient listening, the thoughtful gestures, expressed an intimacy that needed no words. Each interaction became a gentle reminder that emotional closeness could exist without overstepping boundaries, and that trust was just as powerful as passion. Natalia's presence was now a stabilizing force, a source of guidance and reassurance that allowed Julio to feel grounded. The weight of previous tension had transformed into a quiet strength, shaping their relationship in ways that were enduring and nurturing. Looking ahead, Julio understood that the lessons they had learned were invaluable. Emotional restraint, respect, and careful navigation of desire were not limitations, but tools that had allowed their connection to flourish safely. Natalia's mentorship, kindness, and perceptiveness had helped him see the beauty in measured closeness. He realized that true intimacy wasn't always about the physical. It could exist in the subtle gestures, the shared laughter, the understanding glances, and the unspoken support. Their bond had become a private world of trust and respect, a sanctuary where they could be close without jeopardizing what mattered most. And in that realization, Julio felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that their connection would endure, shaped by wisdom, care, and mutual respect. In the quiet moments that followed, Julio and Natalia shared a sense of serenity that had been absent during the early days of their connection. The intensity of their emotions had settled into something stable, meaningful, and profoundly human. Every smile, every word, and every small gesture now carried the weight of trust, proof of the careful choices they had made. Julio appreciated the emotional richness of their bond, understanding that restraint had not diminished their connection, it had strengthened it. Natalia's presence became a source of inspiration and calm, a reminder that closeness could be deeply fulfilling even without crossing dangerous lines. Together, they had learned that emotional intimacy could be both powerful and safe when guided by wisdom. The journey had left them both changed, their perspectives on desire, connection, and family deepened. Julio recognized the value of patience, the courage required to hold back impulses, and the strength found in emotional honesty. Natalia understood that mentorship and warmth could create profound bonds without compromising principles or decorum. Their relationship became a quiet testament to trust, restraint, and understanding, a rare kind of closeness that many seek but few achieve. The lingering thrill of past tension was replaced by a steady, comforting rhythm, a mutual respect that allowed their bond to flourish in a sustainable, meaningful way. Every interaction now carried the reassurance that they had navigated temptation wisely, preserving both their connection and the trust of those around them. In the end, Julio and Natalia found a harmony that neither had expected, a balance of emotional intimacy and mindful boundaries. They learned that some feelings are too complex to act on, yet too significant to ignore, and that true closeness often comes from understanding, patience, and self-control. Their story closed not with regret, but with reflection, a quiet celebration of the human capacity to connect deeply while honoring limits. Every glance, every conversation, and every gesture became part of a shared language of trust, respect, and affection. And as they moved forward in life, both carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing that some connections, when nurtured with care, can endure beautifully, transcending desire while embracing the heart.